Our next speaker is Dr. Albert DeVries. Dr. DeVries is currently a professor at the Department of Animal Sciences at the University of Florida. He grew up on a dairy and swine farm in the Netherlands, and he went to Wageningen University, where he received a bachelor's and master's in animal science with a minor in agricultural economics in 1991. In 1995, he came to the US to pursue a PhD in animal sciences at the University of Minnesota in St. Paul, with a focus on dairy science, applied economics, operations research, and statistics. After graduation in 2001, Albert accepted a faculty position at the University of Florida in Gainesville. He currently teaches 2 undergraduate dairy courses and advises undergraduate dairy students and graduate students. His research interests are in optimization of culling and replacement strategies, statistical process control, economics of reproduction and genetics, and precision dairy farming. In his extension role, he works with the allied dairy industry and dairy farmers on farm financial management to apply the results of dairy systems management research. Albert is married to Kim, who is a small animal veterinarian, and together they have twin daughters, Grace and Karen, and 4 cats. They live near Newberry, Florida. Once again, it is our honor to be able to have Dr. DeVries with us this morning to give his presentation, and I will hand the reins over to you.
Okay, Kale, thank you for that introduction. You asked me to talk about culling strategies and economic impact. And I'm not sure I really have a lot of concrete culling strategies, but I want to walk people through some ideas that may affect, how we cull cows. So what I want to do today, give you a little bit about culling statistics and some risk factors. Then show a little model on the economics of productive lifespan. And I sometimes use productive lifespan and longevity simultaneously with culling. A few slides on perhaps improving the use of the trait productive life in the selection index. I think we have some ideas on how to make that better. And then I want to say something about culling decision support. All right, and hopefully through the talks there's enough material that people feel it was worth their time and it helps them think about culling a little differently. Well, this data that is annual cull rates. It's from DRMS, so DHA data. This is it's 2 years old, but it's just fairly similar as of now too. And then we find that about 38% of cows are replaced every year. But there's about 4 percentage points of that are animals that are moved to other farms. And so if you take the 4% off with 38, you get to 34% cull rate. And if you do 1 over 34%, then that gives us a productive life of about 2 years and 11 months. So not quite 3 years after first calving that cows stay in the herd. And we see some variation, quite a bit of variation, right? So there's herds that are below 30%, and there are herds that are up to 50%. So what's up with that? Age at first calving in this data, there's more than 9,000 herds, so it's a little over 2 years, 25.4 months. So if you put it all together, then the longevity, how long does the cow stay in the herd, is a little over 5 years, but not much. Now, how does this 34% compare to the past? I found a paper from 1939, and there Cannon and Hansen remarked that it's known that replacement rates in dairy herds are rather high. And I'm not sure what they compare this with, but they found that back then it was necessary to replace approximately 21 to 28% of the milking herd annually. So it seems cull rates, if that would be a straight line from the 1930s to now, have not decreased, but gone up some. I'll say a few words about risk factors here. This is some data we did 10 years ago now with Pablo Pinedo. And we looked at risk of culling per day. The graph we're looking at are open cows. And so at the bottom is days after calving, and we see an increase in cull risk mostly metabolic problems, probably. The farmers decide to kill cows. And then it flattens, it slows down the daily risk. And then you see towards the right end of the curve, the tail goes up again because those are cows that fail to get pregnant on time, and farmers start culling those as well. All right, and we see clearly an increase in the daily risk if the cow gets older. Right, first lactation cows have lower risk, also stay flatter longer than older cows. Older cows, the daily risk increases earlier. We looked at these are open cows. We looked at pregnant cows as well. And this was also DHEA data. That was about 25% of the risk of open cows. So clearly, pregnancy, as we probably all know, is prohibits culling to a large extent. Now, this data on cull risk that we saw go up with age, we see that back into DHA data as well. This is percent of cows not reaching the next lactation. And lactation 1, percents are lower. It's about 20% not reaching next lactation. And you get to really older cows, and it's more than half that started the lactation did not finish that lactation. What's sort of surprising here, perhaps, or at least noteworthy, is that percent lactation is not completed in 2016, is slightly greater than in 2007. Okay, and I haven't looked at the latest data that's available. It may be just 1 more year worth of data, but clearly not a decrease in cull rate. Now, I asked some of my farmers here in Florida, said, which cows survive? And they tell me, well, it's cows that don't stand out. You basically don't notice them, right? And it's cows that survive. They have maybe 4 events per lactation. They calve, obviously 1 calving. They just take 1 breeding to get pregnant, so no repeat breedings. We may do a pregnancy diagnosis, and then we find them pregnant, and there's no abortion, and then we dry them off, they calve again, right? And in addition, we just milk these cows. Now, we could fill a whole lecture here about risk factors for culling. We already briefly talked about parity and pregnancy, but it's clear that if you look at the literature, that if the cow has ketosis, for example, there's a higher risk of culling, or mastitis, there's a higher risk of culling. There's lots of these factors documented. Cows that are sick, they're lame, they're not pregnant, that have poor conformation, that have bad temperament, that have low milk yield. All these factors obviously are risk factors for culling. That means cows that have those are increased at risk for culling. Now, I will not talk about how all these factors affect culling exactly here. We did review them recently for the animal paper. So if anybody's interested, I'd be happy to send you that paper. Now, I want to spend quite a bit of time about genetics actually in this talk, perhaps because I'm interested in it. I'm also intrigued by the fact that our cull rates are what they are. I also say this because I've been talking in Europe several times, and there's a movement to really extend productive life, keep cows longer in the herd, which also means therefore that the cull rates come down. Right, cows stay longer in the herd. If the herd size is fixed, then cull rates have to come down. There really is a strong focus there on how do we manage that. Well, here we have data from Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding, and this is productive life data here, and that's expressed in months. And we basically see from the 1960s to 2017 that the breeding value for productive life, basically the ability to stay in the herd, has increased. Perhaps it was a little flat in the 20 years ago, but mostly it's an increase. All right, and if I compare 2017 to about 1960, so that's close to 60 years, that means in terms of the breeding value for productive life, okay, we've increased the breeding value by 20 months about. Or if you just take the breeding value divided by 2, you get the PTA. That is that the PTA is increased by 10 months. All right. So 20 months breeding value, if this had been expressed in herds, that means cows, we breed them, they are much better to resist culling because animals get a positive breeding value of productive life if they don't cull, but their herd mates do. Then we would have reduced, if we started, say, at 33% in 1960, we would have been at 21% annual cull rate. But clearly, we're not at 21%. We're stuck at about that 34, 35%. All right. And I think in part we can just explain this through some simple, basically closed loop culling mathematics, right? So if our national herd size is constant, and it basically has been for a long time at a little over 9 million cows, and we have about 1.1 calves born per cow per year. That is obviously not every cow has 1.1 calf, but if you count the number of cows in a dairy, you count the number of calvings, you get to a number like 1.1. All right. If we then assume that all female calves are raised to become milking cows, and I exclude here sex semen and beef semen for simplicity, although I know obviously that's a hot item. All right, then it has to be that the national annual cull rate is about 35% because these female calves, if we raise them, they have to enter herds, and herds have to cull cows and make room for these heifers, right? So to some extent, and the question is to how much extent, is the fact that we have these heifers in the pipeline a driver then of national cull rate? Because clearly, genetically, our cows, if they were to compete compared to 1960 cows, the 1960 cows, none of them would stay in herds long. They'd all be gone because our cows are a lot more competitive. All right, regarding productive life a little more here. I sometimes hear that we really want a lifetime profit per cow to be the goal. Okay, so cows live long. It makes sense then that a lifetime profit goes up, right? Because we replace them less often, for example. But I would argue that this is not really the goal for commercial dairy producer. And if you look at just basic economics, then the rule would be to optimize your profit per unit of most limiting factor. All right. Now, if the number of cows, you're stuck with, say, 100 cows, and that's all you have, you will never, ever replace one. Yes, then extending their life would make sense. But often we have other limiting factors. Here, for example, I have a list, dollars per kg of milk, or this would be in the quota system, per cow per year if the number of cow places is limiting. Per milking cow per year, that is a better rule if, say, parlor capacity is limiting. We can just milk, X number of milkings per day. There's also here per kilograms of phosphate, because in Europe, in the Netherlands, that is a rule that they have phosphate quotas. So there's a trade-off between more young stock and fewer cows, because collectively the total amount of phosphate in manure drives then that phosphate quota. And you can see there that since that got implemented, that productive life really increased by several percentage points, maybe 5 or so, because then farms could reduce their number of young stock and have more milking cows. All right, so clearly there's possibility for movement there. In New Zealand, you talk about per hectare, okay, or maybe if labor is your limiting factor, you talk about the labor units per year. All right, but I think in the U.S. context, it's probably per milking cow per year or per cow per year is often the right goal here. So not the length of cow, because maybe I want to replace my cow with a better cow, right? So the next couple of slides, I want to walk everybody through a simple model on some key factors that determine how long cows should remain in the herd. And I'm aware that what I'm going to show you is far from reality, but I think it really illustrates some key principles that drive these culling decisions, and maybe we can set some of the preconceived notions, correct those as well. All right, so in what I'm going to show you, I will change my cull rates from 55% down to 20%. So high cull rates, short productive lives, to like to 20%, low cull rates, high productive lives. And when I do that, I basically have an underlying herd distribution. Okay, so for example, if I were to look at this orange one, the 30%, that's the most clearly one, then I have about 30% of my animals are in the first lactation, about 20% in the second, 17, 18 in the third, some in the fourth, and so on, right? So 20% or 30% annual cull rate means that on average, I replace 30% of my cows every year, but I still have a distribution of a certain number of animals in the first lactation, a lower number in the second, again, a lower number in the third. And actually, I extended this math all the way to the 20th lactation number, knowing full well that there's hardly any cow to be found on a dairy that lives that long. But on the other hand, there's very few cows, even in this model, that make it that far, right? We see the vast majority of animals, regardless of cull rates, being in the first up to the fifth, sixth parity day. So a little bit of the math, and the rest I'll keep simpler than this, I hope. All right. So one thing, obviously, that has to do with cull rates is cow depreciation, right? So heifers lose value from the time we purchase them or we have invested in raising them to the moment we cull them, including, some that die, obviously. So there's a depreciation, there's a loss in value of these animals. And here I have this depreciation from high depreciation, $2,000 from heifer to culling. Probably don't find that today, all the way to 500. That's a much lower depreciation, right? So, for example, if my heifer was $1,500, my cull rate was $500, I have a depreciation of $1,000 there. And now I want to spread out this depreciation over the number of years that this animal stays in the herd. And clearly, the longer animals stay in the herd, the lower my depreciation cost per cow per year is, right? So just this graph would favor lower cull rates and therefore longer productive lives, because my annual cost of keeping that cow, a cow in the herd, is lower in terms of depreciation. So I'm going to build, I have like 4 or so or 5 of these figures here. So let me setting up a little bit. At the bottom, I varied my animal cull rate. As you can see, from 50% down to 10%. And then in yellow here is my herd replacement cost. Okay, here assuming a cow depreciation of $1,000. All right, so if I had an annual cull rate of 50%, that's 2 years. Depreciation is $1,000, and I divide that, spread it out over 2 years. That would be $500 per year, just for the herd to make up for herd replacement cost, right? So we've seen these yellow numbers on the previous slide. Now, I also have some blue numbers here that I picked the lowest of the bars here. I set that to 0, and then the other. Then if you go to the left in this case, because all the total costs are higher, I show what the opportunity from optimal is. And most of them are off the chart. But if I went from 10% to 15% cull rate, all right, then that is a difference of $50. So this little yellow bar here at 15% is $50 higher than the yellow-orange bar here at 10%. So clearly this would, if this was the only factor, we'd want to have low cull rates. All right, but there's a slide from Zoetis, and I like this slide because it illustrates another important concept here. And I'm looking here at the blue bars, and this is milk per day. All right. And at the bottom here, we have Parity group. And clearly, cows that are second or third or fourth or fifth lactation, they make more milk than first lactation cows. These first lactation cows need to grow some still, but they produce less milk per day. Okay, and so mature cows, and these are here fourth, fifth lactation, would be likely more profitable cows, right? So would we not want to milk a lot of fourth, fifth lactation cows? Well, if that's the case, then clearly we don't want to have a very high kill rate because that would reduce the number of fourth, fifth lactation cows. And perhaps we also don't want to have a lot of very old cows. Okay, now I realize there's some culling going on. I mean, the cows that we see these blue bars for are survivors of previous lactation, so there's some culling in there. But nevertheless, there's two important factors in here. One, that again, young cows are not mature, and maybe secondly, when cows get too old, they're not as efficiently either. And I put some numbers to that as best as I could, with a lot of uncertainty, really. Okay, and here I put at 0 my first lactation animal, and then I did some income over feed cost calculations. And I found that, for example, a fifth or sixth lactation animal might make us $500 per cow per year. Now, we can argue about that, whether that's the right number or not, but for the principle, perhaps that's enough. All right. I also have then past the peak, I have an aged cow cost here. All right. And clearly, I really don't know how much this aged cow cost is, how really old cows become less efficient. In my assumption here, I assume there is no really prior culling happening. This is truly just the fact of maturity. So not just surviving animals of previous culling, because that would create some bias, right? So I can also convert this graph into an opportunity cost. Okay, in other words, a first lactation animal compared to a fifth lactation animal here, let's just look at maturity, would be $500 less profitable. So, and I can call that a $500 opportunity loss, if you will. And similarly, a very old cow here, a 10th lactation animal compared to the best mature animal, this would be a $200 aged cow cost. Okay, opportunity lost because I'm milking an old cow that is not mature. Right now, clearly, I understand that you cannot just milk fourth and fifth cows, as, you know, in this model here, where I assume just heifers come and cows get gradually killed over time. But I'm converting now this aged cow cost and this lack of maturity cost for younger animals on top of my graph here, right? And I think this is correct here. So I'm looking at the cost of herd structure. I already had herd replacement cost, and if I have a pretty high kill rate, so low average numbers of productive life here, I would have a lot of first, second lactation animals, and I have a high lack of maturity cost. Okay, and if I drop my kill rate, then clearly my lack of maturity cost decreases. And but it's not zero, because even here, or I still have animals, even with a 10% kill rate, if I could get that, I still have first lactation animals, I have second lactation animals, and I have animals past 10 lactation. But I do see that my aged cow cost increase as well. All right, so and I'm interested now in the lowest of these bars here, putting them all together. Okay, and so in this case, this would be a 15% kill rate. All right, that would be the lowest, and then you can see the top of the bars at 20% and 10%, how much they differ on the blue scale compared to the 15% kill rate. Now, maybe I forgot to mention this, but I assumed that in this lack of maturity cost and this aged cow cost, we ignored the fact that there is genetic progress. Right, so we're really looking at the same animals that are young, then get mature, and maybe get old. All right, I'll get to genetics perhaps in two ways a little bit here. This one is quick. Just to illustrate that if we had low kill rates, we would need fewer replacement heifers, and we would have more opportunity in the herd to make higher valued calves, perhaps, for example, with beef on dairy. All right, so another factor then of the low kill rate would be needing fewer dairy heifer calves. Perhaps I can capture more premium from crossbred calves that I don't need. So calves that I don't need, surplus calves. And I done some math there too, and I added that in here, the calf value opportunity cost. And again, a low kill rate or a high kill rate means pretty much I need all the dairy heifers that I can make there to replace my killed cows. And I would have opportunity loss compared to a low kill rate where I can make more money on these calves, okay? But it's not this little blue line here. It's not a lot of money there. That doesn't really drive the maximum kill rate to the left or to the right. All right, let's look at genetics then, because that's a major factor we haven't talked about. And I think a lot of producers, not sure how many, but would say, well, I need to bring in all my heifers in the herd because they're my best genetics. All right, so that's what we'll incorporate next. So the question is, is greater longevity or productive life always better, right? If cows could stay in the herd forever, is that what we wanted? Well, this is a 1950s champion cow. She produced 154,000 pounds of milk in 13 lactations, so clearly an old cow, great longevity, great productive life, but she made only 12,000 pounds per lactation. All right, so today, who wants to milk this cow, right? Would you like to have a whole herd of these 1950s cows that sort of refuse to die but make only 12,000 pounds per lactation? Well, this is genetic trend for net merit. Net merit has selection index, profitability index, right? Several traits, many traits. And this is from 1980 to 2015. This is by birth year, and we can see clearly that the line goes up and that animals are genetically better for profitability index here. We also see that the genetic lag is growing. Now, the genetic lag is the difference between the genetic package, if you will, of the bulls you can buy and the cows in the herd, okay? And so because since genomics got widely used, we see an increase in genetic progress here for net merit. It says doubled that rate of progress here. That also means that the genetic lag with the cows becomes greater, but eventually the slope of the cows will be the same slope as the slope for the bulls. So the cows are going to catch up. All right, but although these cows are going to catch up, if I had older cows compared to younger cows, I don't really have sort of the latest machinery in there. All right, and so I'm not going to walk you through this graph, but if you just look at asset replacement theory, and really cow culling is a form of asset replacement theory, if you look at it that way, then we would replace sooner if the challenger, that would be a replacement heifer, is technically better than the incumbent. That's the cow in the herd. All right, so let's include that in the graphs that we've had so far. So I looked at the genetic progress in net merit, and I used $50 per year that the net merit or any selection index is improving, increasing per year. Now, if I look at the net merit, today is maybe $70, where it was $30 15 years ago. So I picked perhaps a conservative number here. And so now I can include genetic opportunity cost, okay? And so really, if I have, and this is genetic opportunity compared to bulls that are breeding bulls available. All right, and so my genetic opportunity cost increases with older animals. All right, because I'm basically milking an old cow. The distance genetically between the cows in the herd and the best available genetics is greater than when I turn over my herd quickly and bring in the latest genetics all the time. All right, so if I include it in here, and I think it's still valid that I can add up all these different cost factors, and I'm looking at the lowest total here, and I get to 20%. Okay, although it's pretty close to 25%. All right, so even if I included then genetics in here, and again, it's a simple model. There isn't really any disease culling happening, although every lactation there's X% that leave in order to get to these annual kill rates. I don't end up with a very high kill rate. Okay, the pool of improved genetic progress from my heifers doesn't weigh up against all these other factors in the herd. For example, lower replacement cost, more mature animals. Okay. I did a little bit of sensitivity analysis. Here, my cow depreciation is only $500. It was $1,000 before. And I increased my sire PTA now to $75 per year. Okay, so both these factors would favor higher animal kill rates. And I end up with about 30%, but I am still a ways off from 45 to 50%. All right, so when I look at this analysis, although simple, I cannot find any evidence that raising all these heifers and bringing them into the herd would be the right thing to do from a genetic standpoint. Yes, it helps, and improved genetics does increase kill rate some, but not very much. Also did some literature review on this. All right, published literature review, about 4 or 5 studies here. And then this increased genetic progress, and I think I looked at almost doubling genetic progress in today's world compared to what it was before 2010, should increase cow kill rates by just a few percent at most. Okay, so this conclusion from this paper can also be seen then in this previous analysis. All right, I want to switch gears here and point to 2 different topics here. And I'm looking at my clock here. All right, so my grad student Michael Schmidt and I, with the help of Paul van Reden at USDA, we wondered about the use of the trait productive life in our selection indexes. All right, and let me illustrate you briefly, and this is purely to get you thinking about some things too. All right, what we thought was the problem. And so here, this is actually the net merit. These are the traits from the 2017 index. It doesn't include any health index, but the principle is still the same here. And I have a number of traits here. Many of these traits repeat every lactation: milk, fat, protein. If I have high PTAs, well, every longer lactation that the animal stays in the herd, I would presumably repeat, that genetic benefit. The blue ones would be traits that repeat only once in the life of an animal. All right, so only once. I have 2 bulls here. The bottom really doesn't matter here, but the one is a 609 bull, the other one is a 707 bull. And we're just looking at fat and productive life. And so this bull A makes a lot of fat, all right, 112 pounds, but doesn't live long, okay, minus 3 months compared to the average. Now, the average is about 2.8 lactations, so about 2.5 lactations here, or 3 months less. All right, where this bull B is poor in fat, although he's still positive, but refuses to die, okay, plus 11 productive life. And the net merit includes the value of that productive life in its cow depreciation adjustment, essentially, in the net merit. But what it does not do, it does not give these different bulls credit for how long they stay in the herd. Okay, so as far as this fat goes, this 112 versus this 19, both bulls in the current net merit get credit for this difference in fat for only 2.8 lactations, even though this animal produces this plus 112 pounds of fat not for 2.8 lactations, but maybe for 2.5. And this animal produces 19 pounds of fat, not for 2.8 lactations or 28 months, but for 11 months more. All right, so that doesn't sound quite right. We felt you need to give animals credit for these differences in these lactation traits for as long as their daughters stay in the herd. All right, we calculated two indexes. I won't go into the math here. This one is ANPV, annualized net present value. It assumes identical replacement. And this is annualized value with opportunity cost, okay? So this assumes improved replacement. This next index here, this index assumes that as long as animal stay in the herd, refuse to die, I deny this genetically better heifer to come. All right, and I won't get too into the math here, but we did give credit for animals that are, say, high milk or high fat, high protein per lactation. We gave them credit for as many lactations as these daughters would stay in the herd, not just 2.8. All right. And so what this rebuilt index would do, it would actually re-rank bulls some. Not a major re-ranking, but some re-ranking. All right, and so this is the August 2019 evaluation. Here we have bulls. I think this was the top ranking at that time. And we saw actually that the top bull for net merit would, in our indexes, would not be the top bull. And if we looked at the AVOP, the one with improved genetic opportunity cost, it would actually drop 3 places. All right, so these bulls would drop or change a couple positions. And if you go down the list, you can get to, say, bull 100. And sometimes he changes 40 or 50 positions. All right, so clearly, I hope eventually that we get to a better, improved way of putting productive life into these indexes, because it does change, although not majorly, how we should look at productive life and therefore culling as far as when it comes to selecting bulls for profitability. All right, I want to go through a few slides here on culling still, and I'm looking at my clock, close to 40 minutes here. All right, so is there something to decide? To me, that is an intriguing question, right? Is culling all, well, we're stuck with it, it's just we can't play, we can't do anything, or is there something to decide? Fetro, in a review, would say that most culling is for economic reasons. I agree with that. Criteria for culling vary between farmers. This is an old study here, but these farmers looked at the same cows, came to different rankings and different ideas about which one should be culled. Farm advisors and farmers don't agree which cow should be culled. Older economic models would say that less than 30% annual replacement is economically optimal. Knowing that this is farm dependent, farmers also find that culling decisions are not a priority. I know it's old research here. And yet, there's frequent calls for culling decision support. I probably get an email every 2 or 3 weeks. Somebody says, do you have something that I can rank my cows? And I know how to rank cows. We have to basically calculate cash flows to keep the cow until some optimal time into the future. And we can basically calculate that versus culling the cow now, replacing her with a heifer. Right, that takes cash flow predictions, and it takes about 5-6 years into the future for the animal that I have, including her replacements, and also for if I were to cull this cow and replace her right now. And we can take the difference of these cash flows. And in the literature, that's called retention payoff, future value, keep value. I think the cow value in dairy comp is a similar concept. All right, so this is this principle that we've just talked about here. There's a keep decision on top. The black is the current cow. The current cow gets replaced over time with the cash flows from replacement animals, different colors, or I can replace my current cow now, and even over time, my replacement heifer gets replaced and so on. And if I need to do this for about 5-6 years into the future for a certain slot, then my values have been stabilized. And I take the difference of both calculations and I get to my keep value or cow value, perhaps. Now, the algorithms behind these cash flow predictions can be quite different. Okay, it's not like they're all coming up with the same answer at all. I think I have maybe 3 or so more slides. So if I calculate this with my own machinery here, then I have these retention values of keep values here. At the bottom here is stations calving. If I take the top ones, this is a high producing cow. The blue closed dot would be the value of keeping this cow compared to replacement. So as long as it's positive, I want to keep this cow, even though she's open. All right, if I look at the green one, closed, that's an open cow, that's a low producing cow, and she drops below 0 quicker. So when she drops below 0, that'd be the right time to replace her. The open dots here are these values for when animals get pregnant. All right, so here I assume pregnancy about starting in the 3rd month, and there's a little bit of loss because perhaps some abortion happening, for example, in the future, but the pregnant cows are worth more than the open cows. Yeah, so drop below 0, replace. So ideally, this is the best rule if we can get these cash flow predictions correctly done. And there's work to be done there. I compare this RPO rule with another rule, just for illustration. This would be income over variable cost, my other rule. For example, milk sales minus feed cost. All right, let's say milk sales minus feed cost. And I look at my RPO over time, and we can see that the RPO drops below 0, time to replace, when the income over feed cost, as far as I could estimate this for this animal, would still be positive, 250 per day. All right, so I would, if I hang on to these cows until milk sales equals about feed cost, then I'm hanging on too long to these animals. I have days, weeks where I make very little money with this animal, and I deny a more profitable animal into that herd. So the RPO would be a much better ranking for animals for culling decisions. I do a little bit of that here. This is a PC Dart graph that I work with on a farmer for development. And so we do have keep values and keep percents. All right, so this is a trial, this is experimental, but this producer likes it. He uses these keep values, goes to his own herd. This is after DHA test, making culling and dry off decisions. And this is an animal that is now beef, it's cull, and she had a low RPO, a low keep value. It's really a driver of their decision making. All right, now, if you were to just cull all negative RPOs, you cull those, and all positive RPOs you keep, that will also drive your cull rate in your herd. All right, let me summarize all this flood of material here. So I think average cull rate has increased a little over time. It seems most cows are broken when they're culled, at least that's what we're being told, but it's really all driven by economics. Even broken cows, they may be obvious culled ones, but really there's economic principles behind it. I really didn't talk much about consumer perception. I don't think in the US it's a big deal, but in Europe, a lot of people believe that cows need to live long. All right, so there's a strong push to reduce cull rates. We've saw that faster genetic progress reduces optimal productive lifespan or increases culling, but just a little bit. I think that our current call rates compared to what much of the math says would be ideal suggests that we should reduce call rates some. And I think we're starting to ask that questions more now that we're doing a lot of beef semen in dairy herds. You know, how much heifer do we really need? So I'm sort of glad we're starting to ask that question here. And then to really improve these decisions, I think we still need some better tools to support these placement decisions, and we're actively very fast working on this, and hopefully this will be market ready soon. All right, so thank you for the attention.
All right, thank you, Dr. DeVries. A lot of stuff there for us to think about. Again, if you're listening, we do have time for a couple questions, so you can leave them in the chat box on YouTube there. To get us started, looking for some clarification, I guess. Don't you think amortization per liter of milk that is produced is more indicative than depreciation? So the point is here that the producer gets paid by milk and not by the number of years that the cow stays in the herd. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, if you're limiting, if I think that comes back to the idea that we're limited by the amount of milk we make. Mm-hmm. Okay. So in a Canadian system, I think that would be the right way to look at it. In the US system, I think it's still per time. If I go back to the math that I showed here, where I've assumed that the number of cows in my herd is basically a constant factor. So then I would not necessarily do it per liter of milk. That sounds almost to me as we want to extend productive life very long for cows. And I think we forget the opportunity cost there.
Thank you. I know in a lot of your examples, you were using $19 a hundredweight. I think you know where I'm going with this.
It's an old slide, but it's for the principle. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So the way milk prices are looking currently, does that change? And I guess kind of a question along the same lines. We see a lot of producers that are having to make some short-term decisions on rapid culling or drying off cows sooner, you know, some of these harder economic decisions along these lines. How does what you've talked about today relate to this hopefully unique situation that we're seeing right now?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, good questions. We went through this exercise in our own University of Florida herd. In our co-op, we had to cut milk 10%. So we said, well, what do we do? And we did not know how long this cut would last. So it's at least, it was in April, it extends in May. And we're looking at milk prices. They're like $3 less or so hundredweight than March prices. We decided to dry off cows. We culled a few, but clearly if you culled too many, you know, the question is, and this is black box thinking almost, like what will milk prices be 4 or 5 months from now, right? And if they get up and you didn't have these animals in the herd, you know, that scares us. So and this is all sort of thinking about risk, we decided we wanted to have the capacity in the herd to make more milk quickly if prices warrant that. So we went to drying off. We culled a few, but not much. I would not make my decisions on, oh my God, I have to kill cows. Now, obviously, you got to look at cows anyways, you know, if they have a future there. But I don't think that these changes in the last couple of months should really impact culling a lot.
Okay. And I'll just ask this one. We have about a minute. If I didn't get a chance to get to your question this morning, you can feel free to reach out. Dr. DeVries' email is here on the slide, or you can email us and we can pass the question on. But we have a question. Could this analysis be extended to evaluation of extended lactation, so greater than 14 months, as a way to increase productive life by reducing the number of calvings per cow?
Yeah, the model that I showed was actually too simple for that, but you know, hold on a little bit here because we have something better there too. Yeah, because that's a question. Yeah, I realize that, and I hate to give you answers based on a too simple analysis. Okay, but clearly in Europe that is also a big topic.
All right, thank you.